it felt every day for the first decade of building this business here in the Salt Lake Valley, like we were going to go out of business. Like that's what it felt like every single. It was like a survival test. It's like, what do we have to overcome next? I would just say to anyone listening here, you can do it. The day might seem dark. The day turns to a week. And pretty soon it turns into a month and it turns into a year, and you get up and you grind and you overcome, and it all serves to make you a better person, to make you maybe a better husband or wife or spouse. The decisions that we make on a daily basis affect us in the eternities.
This is Jeff Burningham, and welcome to the Extraordinary Us podcast, where we talk to guests, some that are known, very well known, not so well known. The guest we have today is sporting a sweet haircut, one that I have not seen, Brad Bonham. I really like it. Tell me a little bit about the hair real quick before we jump in here.
Look,
I've never seen this hair.
Look, I'm balding on top.
Yeah.
I have a COVID beard. This only happened during COVID. I'd never had a beard before. It makes me look like 20 years older. In fact,
Same with me.
We were at the Jazz game the other night, and somebody walked up, and they're like, "Oh, is this your daughter?" Pointing to my wife. I'm like, "Man, I look really old with this thing. Like, there's gray in my beard and everything else." So I happened to take my wife to the barbershop the other day. This was like a month and a half, 2 months ago. And the barber had a mullet, and I'm like, "Man, that is a sweet mullet. Like, man, you are rocking that thing." And Megan's like, "No, you'd never do that."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, so I took it as kind of a challenge, and here we are. And I think it's kind of turned into
I kind of like it.
It's like a social experiment now.
Yeah.
I'm like, will people take me seriously, like balding on top, mullet in the back? And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it.
I think your hair is great. Yeah. It's better than mine.
Thanks.
and you're like ready for summer. You have the COVID beard and you got the mullet going.
That's right. Yeah.
So most of you know Brad Bonham. He is a great guy. Let me remind you real quickly the purposes of the podcast, tell you a little bit about Brad in case you don't know. And then we're going to have a fun conversation today. It's March Madness, baby.
March Madness.
We're in the studio here together. So the purpose of the podcast, number one, no matter our differences, and we're all different. Brad has more hair than I do. I don't have hair. There's always a lot more alike that we have in common. And somehow we have forgotten that in this day and age. We are so divided. And so remember, there's always a lot more alike that we have in common. Number two, because of that, let's exercise compassion for each other. We never know what someone's going through. Brad's had some challenges in his family just here recently. You never know what someone is going through. Less comparison, more compassion. And third and last, too often we let mistakes of the past or fear for an unknown future cloud our vision, help us make bad decisions. Let's live in faith. Let's go forward optimistically. And Brad is an excellent example of this. Brad is a well-known, one of the best entrepreneurs in the state of Utah, if I might say.
That's
Brad.
kind of you.
It's true. And that's where I met Brad. I think, Brad, tell me if this is right. I think this is where we met. I was an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in 2014 or something like that, in the mid-2000s, and then was a judge. And I think, Brad, you were up next.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to you and being so impressed with the business you'd built at Walker Edison. You obviously became an Entrepreneur of the Year, but that you're not just an entrepreneur. You're a philanthropist. We're going to talk about that. And you're also interested in politics.
Yes.
One of the few, I will say, kindly and nicely, one of the few entrepreneurs, I think, really in the state of Utah that is interested in politics in as much as you ran even for politics. You ran for a House seat.
Yep, that's right.
And we'll talk a little bit about that. So that's Brad, and that's how we met. He's also the dad of 4 beautiful children. He mentioned his wife, Megan, and he's just an all-around good guy. So Brad, I did like 10 or 15 minutes of research, which is what I normally do before he came in. And I noticed on your LinkedIn account and somewhere else that you said CEO, which is normal, Walker Edison, and decision maker. Tell me, why is that on there, decision maker? And what are some of the biggest decisions you've made in your life or most important decisions? How do you face making decisions? Tell us about it.
Look, when I go into shop for clothes, it's the challenge is how quickly can I get out of here? All right, and
I'm
so
the same way, yeah.
It's like let's make these decisions. Let's make them quickly. am one of those, and it kind of sounds generic, but like, let's probe the edges of decision making, see how quickly we can discover where we need to go as a business and how quickly we can fail at this. And I feel like some of our very best strategic initiatives have come from us trying things that we didn't know how to do. And we figured it out very quickly whether it was a path that we should go down or not. And so when I talk about decision making, it's really, don't be afraid to try.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to fail. I mean, like, man, my path to success is littered with a whole bunch of failures. And I think like the very essence of entrepreneurship is those that are willing to continue on, even when you get a no, even when your task fails.
For sure.
And when I talk about decision making, that's what I refer to.
Yeah, I love that. We know a lot of the same entrepreneurs in the state, some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the state. None of them have a straight path up and to the right. It's easy to look at someone and say, they've always been on top or this. No, they haven't. They have gone through a lot to get there. It's like a squiggly line, right? Ups, downs, twists, turns, but a general path up. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think, I was an adjunct faculty professor for 5 years teaching entrepreneurship, and
at the U or
actually at LDS Business College, now called Ensign College.
Oh, that's cool.
It was almost like an LDS church calling, but like,
but teaching.
Yeah, and I
cool.
taught this kind of capstone class on how to import products because I'm a product guy, and it was absolutely terrible because my syllabus was just like, find a product, import it, and that's your grade. You know what I mean? And
like that's what they had to do. It was practical and learning. Those are some of the best classes.
And by the way, you had to do it for free. You couldn't spend any money because my whole thing was, when people think of being an entrepreneur, it's all about risk management, risk this. I'm like, well, what if you don't have to risk anything? Mm-hmm. What if your only risk is putting in hard work to get something done?
Yeah.
And so I would help these students come up with a plan. Like, what do you know a lot about? Okay, I know a lot about photography. Cool. What's a part that's really hard to find? And so kind of walk them down this path. Then we would negotiate with factories, either domestically or overseas, and they would negotiate a free sample to come in. And so we had all these products arriving from different places that none of these kids had to pay for, that they could then go sell.
That's cool.
And so anyway.
No, that's awesome. What I didn't know you were a teacher. Did you enjoy that?
It was so fun.
Yeah.
It was so
You're
fun.
not doing that now, though.
I'm not now, just because my life has become very
hectic,
very, very hectic. I would love to go back and do that, though. Like that's part of my long-term life plan, is to continue teaching.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Walker Edison and another politically inclined entrepreneur, one of, again, the handful, Jonathan Johnson.
Yes.
Who ran for governor before I did, the cycle before I did. He's running Overstock right now. I know that Walker Edison has done a lot with Overstock. Yep. Tell us, for the background, give us the background on Walker Edison, how it came to be, some of the twists and turns, some of the highlights, whatever you'd like to share.
I think one of the reasons why I like students, and I was a student when we started Walker Edison, is that you're a little bit fearless. Like, it's almost like you don't know enough to have any fear about failing. You know what I mean?
I love that. Yeah.
Did
you start, out of college?
I was in college.
Okay.
When
Same with
Walker
me.
Edison
I started my first business, so we got in right away.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. So I was. I'll back up a little bit. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My father was a serial entrepreneur. I've never seen him actually work for anybody else. And so this is the environment that I grew up in. So when people ask me,
the air you breathe.
Yes. Like, what do you want to do? It's this, hey, I want to start my own thing. So I was a college student. I actually paid my way, my living expenses by flipping things that I found in classifieds, right? And so car parts, jewelry. I actually became a certified jeweler.
Are you
I learned how to
serious?
do that. And so I know all this like random information about watch movements and jewelry and diamond ratings and things like that. Wow. And so I would find these things that people were just kind of getting rid of, but I knew more about that product than they did. And so I'd, find the avenue under which I could sell it and make a profit. And so I did that for a number of years. We kind of just stumbled across this piece of furniture. It was a knockdown piece of furniture. I quickly realized that there was a lot of margin in it. Drove it to overstock.com. So I've known Jonathan Johnson for a long time. I literally built the business with an e-com focus because of what overstock.com taught me. It's a fascinating business study in looking around you in your ecosystem and finding opportunities that might not be available for other people. There's only one Overstock.com. It just happened to be located here in Salt Lake City, near me. And they happen to be a leader in online home furnishings.
What year is this roughly?
This was 2006.
Okay, so this is 15, 16 years ago.
Yep, I'm 42
Very
now.
at the beginning, at the beginning of all this. And it really, the furniture came out of, would you say it was kind of a natural progression from the jewelry and everything else? Is that how it was?
So I learned how to sell to, I learned kind of the wholesale market. So I actually started importing gift baskets and I was selling them to local Walmart retail stores. It was just kind of like, what can I find and what can I flip and what can I sell? And like, this was always going through my head. Like when I would go home at night from school or work or whatever, it would be scouring the internet to find something that I could buy and sell and resell for more. And it might just be a one-off thing. It might be multiple things. It might be a lot of things. And so like that was always going through my head. It was like, and then tracking kind of results was like a big thing for me because the more information I had about selling prices of certain products, the less risk there was in me buying that product. Like I knew entry price points. I said, okay, if I could buy this item at this price, I'm virtually guaranteed because I have all this information and I've done it before.
Yeah, to make money.
To make money.
Yeah.
And so
did this drive Megan crazy, by the way, coming home after all of this? And
we had at one point, actually, we had a little condo with a one-car garage. Yeah. We all had to move all of our stuff out because I kept buying things that I would sell on like eBay and other e-commerce marketplaces. And so our garage became filled with like tires and car parts. And like, she's like, seriously, are you going to sell that? I'm like, baby, you don't even understand. Like this, I bought this for $50. I can sell it for $200 on eBay. Like, and so it was all just cash sitting in my garage that I was turning. Yeah.
Huh. That's cool. And so fast forward, like when did Walker Edison become strictly e-commerce or just, like obviously COVID changed e-commerce forever. And I think I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, but tell us a little bit more. I'm curious a little bit more of the journey, 2010 to 22, where we are now,
So our very first client actually wasn't Overstock. It was R.C. Willey.
Okay.
My father knew somebody who knew the buyer at R.C. Willey named Brett Hyatt. Great guy, still in contact with him to this day. IKEA was coming into the valley. And through this contact we had, Brett Hyatt came out the first day we got this container of product in, and he said, I'll take the whole container.
Wow.
I made $20,000 in one day.
Wow.
Because Brett was afraid of IKEA coming in and he needed some ready-to-assemble furniture. The next container that came in, that's when I went to Overstock.com.
Okay.
Overstock taught me that the power of the internet, consumer adoption was spreading to the internet, right? Like we all started buying more and more and more online.
Yep.
But the real power was when I was on vacation, when I was asleep, when I was sick, when I was at my kid's soccer game, I was selling product all of the time. And so that was our focus. From the very beginning of the company, we figured out how to be the absolute best at product design that could ship small parcel at a decent price point online.
Okay. And those things sound easy, right? But taken individually, they are not easy to figure out.
Every single one of those. So you have to have robust sourcing efforts, right? So global supply chain, like where are you going to get the product from? How are you going to get it in? Where are you going to warehouse it? I mean, from one little teeny warehouse in Salt Lake City, I now have millions of square feet spread all across North America. It's all based on demand signals. So I want the product as close to the end consumer as I possibly can. Marketing efforts. If you want to launch 200 new products this year, how many photographers, videographers, copy content, SEO people? I mean, we know through scrape data, through my business intelligence, I have a large BI team, and all we're doing is looking at search data and price point data and other data that we can find on the internet so that we're not guessing when we roll out a product, so that we're using keyword search to optimize search listings so that our product is seen very first when someone searches for a desk or a nightstand. Yes. Like I know what people are looking for. And in fact, You mentioned COVID. This was a really fascinating case study. We were growing really quickly.
Were you scared of COVID?
Everyone thought the world was we thought the world was going to crash. In fact, if you look at Wayfair and Overstock's stock price, over the last 24 months, I think Wayfair dropped to like $20 a share. They peaked at $350 a share, like 6 months later. Like in hindsight, man, should have loaded up on that, right? Yeah. And the same thing with Overstock.com. We were totally in office for 13 straight years. There was no remote work done. Within a 48-hour period, I had transitioned every one of my employees to be a remote employee. Wow. We sent everyone home. We bought all new laptops. We set up all the infrastructure to be able to work from home. And the most fascinating thing happened. People went home. And I know what people were doing during COVID because their furniture purchases mirrored what their activities were. So step one, you go home. What do you need? You need a desk. Yeah. You need a chair. I'm watching all of these trends happen within 60 days or so. Do you know what everybody wanted to do? They wanted to go outside. Yeah. And so patio furniture spiked. Yeah. And like, it was this really fascinating case study in, the lifestyles of people, but manifest through furniture purchases.
Yeah. And that's a big part of entrepreneurship. I kind of say it. I had someone who's running for political office in my office a couple of days ago. And I spoke about hanging around the hoop. You kind of hang around the hoop, and then the ball comes to you and it's your time to dunk it or lay it in or whatever, and you've got to score. My point is, you're hanging around the hoop. Obviously, Walker Edison was a large and very successful business by COVID, but COVID supercharged it, right? Absolutely. But you were hanging around the hoop ready to go and capitalize on that.
That's exactly right. We happen to be in a really great inventory situation. So we were able to capitalize that. I think I sold something like 40,000 desks in the first 3 weeks. Now I was then out of stock, right? Like we had.
And you couldn't get more probably.
Well, we could for a period of time. So what happened was all of the brick and mortar retailers, Target, Walmart, whoever, they blanket canceled all of their POs with factories. And so factory capacity at the initial onset of the pandemic, like factories were calling us, which is very unusual. They're like, hey, do you have anything for us? And as we saw this surge in purchasing happen, we took huge advantage of this, newly unleashed factory capacity. So we were placing extraordinarily large orders. Then everything kind of came roaring back. If you didn't have a digital bend to your retail business, you did all of a sudden, right? Like Best Buy closed 1,400 stores. They pivoted all of their employees to say, we are an online business as of today, right? Yeah. And so, we saw a lot of that, growth really pivot to online.
Yeah, that's cool. Any other interesting behavioral things that you witnessed as the CEO of Walker Edison through COVID? Like, it makes sense, right? Now, hindsight's always 20/20. It's always so easy to see, oh yeah, but while you're in it, it's not that clear. But it makes sense. Like, oh, people have to go home. They're going to buy a desk. They're going to buy a chair. They're going to have to work from somewhere other than the office. I'm just curious. Anything else stick out that might be interesting to our listeners?
Well, interestingly, we track as much data as we possibly can, right? Because that's really informative to us from a product development process and a distribution process. We saw huge groups of people moving out of urban areas and into the countryside. And by the way, if this had now they're all kind of moving back, but if this had persisted, we would have had to have retooled our entire distribution network.
Interesting.
So all of our, I'm in Dallas, I'm in Southern California, I'm in Atlanta, I'm up on the Northeast, and I'm in Ohio, and then Toronto. If it remained that way, I would have been shuttering Dallas. I would have been shuttering, Northeast. I would have been, and we'd have been moving to the countryside with all of
it. Lake Tahoe. You would have been like Park City, right?
Dude, Utah. Yeah. I mean, there was hundreds of thousands of people came to Utah. We had buyers that were, primarily based in Bentonville, Arkansas, that were suddenly in our backyard, in Kanab. By the way, Kanab, Kanab well. Some of the commissioners down there that I'm friends with as well. And Kanab blew up. Their housing market just went insane. And so it was interesting to watch kind of consumer data, both geographically, but also what they were actually purchasing.
Yeah, that's cool. Let me ask you one more question before we pivot out of business. give us the future of e-commerce, or give us some insight. One of the things that's technology is so rapidly changing kind of in every venue. I'm an investor in local e-commerce companies, but I haven't run one. I'm not intimately involved. Like, give us a snapshot or some insight to just a normal person who obviously buys things online, but, doesn't run an e-commerce business. How's e-commerce changing? What does the future of e-commerce look like, Brad, in your opinion?
Yep. So the future of e-commerce is going to be a really great marriage between, so it's going to be omnichannel. So you have to execute really well online, but there are many people still, for example, in our space, I think it's something like 20% of total dollars are transacted online. And that's all we ever talk about is online sales. But that means, Jeff, that 80 cents of every dollar that's spent is still happening in store.
Wow.
And so
will that continue to erode and go more online, or no?
So yes, it will. So we continue to see adoption happening, but it's not going to go to 100% e-com, right? Like, people still like the consumer experience of touching and feeling.
Seeing it.
Yes.
And it's just leisure, walking through a Pottery Barn or whatever. It's kind of like, I don't know. Some people like to do that.
There's an experience around kind of the shopping, aspect that you don't get online. I will say this, though. Online continues to morph. So we have predictive analytics today. We have interactive headsets and cameras and phones today that did not exist just 3 years ago. And so, you'll see these things that pop up in your search that you're like, wait, I didn't search for that, but I did talk about it with my wife. Who's listening to me? You know what I mean? And so there's a little bit of like, I'm actually not sure where all that data goes that Siri and other things are collecting, but
it's a little scary.
It's a little bit scary, but I do know that predictive analytics, AI, like those things continue to be they continue to morph into very data intensive, informative, and action making processes that help businesses like mine, that help Amazon and other retailers.
Have you guys heard of Under Your Bed? I bet you have by now. If you're listening to the Extraordinary Us podcast, I bet you've searched for it maybe and haven't been able to find it.
It's true.
Isn't that how life is sometimes? You just can't find what you're searching for. Constantly searching.
Well, now you can.
Now we've been found. Under Our Bed is finally out. It's really there, people. So type it in right now. Search it up.
You're going to love it.
Look for it live, subscribe, and tell your friends. Can't wait to have you there with Jeff and
Sal,
providing the comedy relief. Good night, Sal.
Good night, Jeff.
But you're not just an entrepreneur, Brad. You ran for the state house in Utah. Hallelujah, man. Good job, brother.
Thanks, Jeff.
You know what it's like. Obviously, I ran a statewide race. That was hard, and I've spoken about that. I don't want to speak about it more, but why? Why did you put yourself out there? What was the experience like? What did you learn? I think, tell us about that. Most people will never have that experience, and I think both you and I agree, it's actually really important. It's really important that we have good people run. Now, it's hard to get good people to run because it's just a hard job with a lot of criticism. But, why did you step out, Brad? And tell us about what you learned.
Look, you open yourself up. When you throw your hat into the public ring, I know, you and Sally and your family were so great to put your hat into that ring. I mean, it's a very hard thing to do. Life decisions you've made are open for public speculation, and it's like, I can see why people don't want to do it, right? On the flip side, public policy, laws that are passed every session. We just ended the session, right? Yeah. And there's so many great people that are working so hard to make Utah a better place up on the hill. Yeah. But public policy that is passed has a direct and real impact on me, my business, on you and your kids. Yeah. That I just can't sit on the sidelines. And so while I did run and I did lose, it may be because I didn't have a mullet then, and people,
they're a little skeptical of you. Because this guy without a mullet, I don't know if he can do the job.
Like I was a little too clean shaven. I don't know. Maybe I need to show up in a flannel shirt and like a mullet, and maybe I just play better there. A lot of it is name idea. Like I learned a lot about.
Was this 2018? By the way,
this was it would have been. I think that's right. What was that? I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was a couple of cycles ago. I met some amazing people. What I did learn, and I've learned this also, I just got back from Washington, D.C., and with our federal delegation, got to take my kids and we got to meet with, our congressmen and senators. And it was a great experience.
Cool, huh? Yeah.
There are people that are working day and night to make Utah a better place.
Yeah.
And whether you're Democrat or Republican, I believe the vast majority of the people that are in the public sphere have one desire, and that's for Utah to be great.
Yeah.
And so my sincere desire as a business person, as a decision maker, I was like, how can I share in this? Like much of the, skill set that I've been able to develop over time, I felt like could lend itself really well to helping public policy, take shape and to, continue to have an amazing place for my kids to grow up in.
Yeah, for sure. And that's critical, right? I mean, this is why I ran for governor. We are growing. We are changing. If we don't have a plan, growth just kind of happens to us and we become whatever we become. I think we need I know politicians aren't paid to be proactive, but we do need a smart plan for the growth that I think we're experiencing. I think you and I see that on the ground every day in entrepreneurship, right? Like I'll have legislators, other politicians in the state call me once, Jeff, is the economy, actually they've stopped doing this, but they were really doing this a lot a year or so ago. Jeff, is the economy really as hot as people? And I said, no, actually it's hotter. Like you do not know what is coming, like you hear these announcements now of fundings or whatever and tech companies and other companies. And you're like, I've never heard of this company. I had heard of them. I knew they were coming, and so like the explosion is going to continue. Do you regret running? Looking back, you lost. I lost as well. It's funny. I don't know if I was with, I was with George W. Bush last week. Oh, really? He's a cool dude, by the way. Like that was really good. My point is, I said, hey, President, I ran for governor in Utah and I lost. And I'm gonna quote him verbatim. He said, you know what? The first time I ran, I got my ass kicked. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me. You keep going, you know? Yeah. Like it was super cool. Anyways, I'm taking this on a tangent. My point was, his opinion as someone who was the governor of Texas, obviously, and the president of the United States, of course, and just he's in his mid-70s now, just such an interesting guy, so folksy, but so wise, He didn't regret it. Do you regret jumping in? I'm trying to see the loss as a positive. How do you view it?
So absolutely not. And my key to running, I happened to be in a meeting where I got to have dinner with a guy named Donald Rumsfeld. And Donald Rumsfeld was like a U.S. House representative, 28 and was Secretary of Defense. He was in the room when Nixon named Spiro Agnew as like his running mate, like just incredible experiences. And he stops after we've been talking for a little while. He looks across the table and he points at me and he says, Brad, you're the exact type of person that we need in politics. And I had no interest in politics. I was like...
This is before your run.
Before my run. I always found it fascinating and I read the news and everything else. But it wasn't until Donald Rumsfeld said, your skill set is one that we need.
That's cool. I didn't know this story.
Yeah. And it took me by surprise because I'm a little struggling entrepreneur at that time. But I took it to heart and I did my diligence. I studied up on the issues and I said, okay, this is where I think we're falling short. And sometimes you lose, you know what I mean? And it's never fun to lose. No. I actually played a joke on Suzanne Harrison, who beat me in House District 32. And the next morning I called up and I think she beat me 56 to 44% or something. It was a resounding victory, right? And I said, Suzanne, I'm just not ready to acquiesce this race. I think there needs to be a recount. And you could have heard a pin drop. She's like, really? She's like, and I'm like, no, I'm kidding. Congratulations. Yeah, like this is, fantastic job. And I hope you represent our interests well.
That's cool. Yeah. What are your future plans? Do you have future plans in politics? Obviously, we need good people there. We spoke a little bit about this before we came on the air today. What are your thoughts or feelings about future runs or diving back in or public service?
So what I've tried to do since the loss is continue to stay engaged. I think
you have
people that are engaged are helpful, to public discourse and public policy matters. And so Governor Herbert was kind enough to appoint me to the Go Ed board, which is now called Go Utah. And so I serve at the service of the governor on that, and promoting business interests within Utah. I serve on the World Trade Center board and the Salt Lake Chamber board. I'm trying really hard to kind of stay engaged. Will I ever run again? I'm not sure. Does the mullet play? Like we don't know. Like we're gonna have to do some.
You'll
focus
be
groups.
rising to the top in a couple of years, and then these pictures of you in the mullet will come out, and it'll be over.
Of the mullet, yes, that'll be the dagger. I don't know. Politics also, I'm watching this kind of from a distance, comes down to timing, right?
Yeah,
so
it does.
Senator Lee, who I was just with in D.C., he rode the Tea Party wave, and Bob, he was able to get around Bob Bennett, and there's just kind of a timing component. There's definitely a name ID component, Jeff, as you kind of traversed the state, I know you felt that and kind of watched it. Going up against a John Huntsman who's been in politics for decades now in Utah and a former governor, that's really hard from a name ID perspective. But I feel like, you and other candidates did a really good job at messaging and things like that. Many of these politicians they have to run multiple times before their name ID kind of becomes more commonplace.
That's for sure. Yeah, and I think those are all good points. And one thing you also do, like you said, you studied up on the issues, you contingency plan. So did I, right? But I'll tell you one thing that was not on my contingency plan: a global pandemic, right? Yeah. And the most here we are running a hard race, a good race. I put all my heart and soul into it, and then COVID-19 happens, and you don't plan for that.
And
what do you do?
Town halls.
You can't. I can't. I'm literally speaking to the back of my iPhone for 12 hours a day in my office.
Yeah.
I can't see anyone. This is at first before everyone got on Zoom about a month later, but the first month we weren't even doing that. I mean, it was so excruciating hard. My point in bringing that up was to say you never know what's going to happen.
You never know,
and you don't know time. Timing is critical. And I think, though, both you and I would encourage any good person who's considering running to put their hat in there and to go for it, wouldn't you?
If someone is listening to this that has the desire to do so, I strongly encourage it. And maybe you don't run this time. Maybe you do and you don't win like you and I did. But you learn a lot and you gain a lot of respect for the process. I believe this country is a very inspired place in which to live. Any of us can throw our hat into the ring and try to make a difference.
Yeah,
you don't need money. You don't need fame. Yep. I think you need, hard work and good ideas, and I think that's really special. And we all take it for granted. I have, offices all over the world for my business now. I don't know of another place where it's this easy to get involved.
Yeah. Okay, one last political question, and then we're going personal. Public policy, that's something that I know you're passionate about. How do we encourage good public policy? How do we move that forward? There are some good, I'll say, think tanks in the state that work on these things. There was a lot of talk after I went out of the governor's race to me about starting up a new public policy institute, right? And I looked at those and thought about it, ultimately didn't do anything. But, what are your thoughts on public policy and how we make sure we have the best policy, obviously here in Utah, but also in the entire country?
I think our elected officials want to hear from us. That's what I hear repeatedly from them. It's if we're not talking to them, they don't know, right? And so either they read it through the news that there's been some referendum that, is going to make the ballot that we're going to vote on. They're trying to do their very best. If we don't talk to them, if we don't get engaged, how do we expect them to hear us, right? And so that's showing up on caucus nights, that's emailing, that's calling. I mean, many of our representatives, I'll point to John Curtis, he holds dozens of town halls every year where any of us can just show up and listen and ask him questions. And that's the kind of representative government that I really enjoy, is people that are sincere about their efforts to listen and then take those thoughts and ideas back to represent us.
Yeah, and I love that, but it's a two-way street, right? Like John makes himself available. We've got to show up.
Absolutely.
I know from talking to Congressman Curtis, there are town halls where he has a handful of people, and that's fine. He does it and it's great, but it's like, we need to be involved. It can be painful. It is hard, but I think it's worth it. And I think we need to stay involved. I mean, things are changing. There's so much uncertainty in the air. We need good people to represent us. And I agree with you. It's an imperfect country we live in, but it's a special place.
Special place.
You were just in DC. I mean, you saw it firsthand. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, before you brought up the Go-Ed boards, et cetera. What's your favorite board and why? I know you've sat on a bunch of boards, business and now nonprofit or politically civic boards. What's your favorite board or a couple, and why is that? I've sat on a lot of boards, and I'm asking this question because it can be frustrating sometimes. Like some boards can. A small percentage of boards work really well, and you feel like we're clicking. This is awesome. We're doing stuff. Other times, it just feels like, why are we in this meet? This is an expensive meeting, and what are we getting done? And so, what boards have you enjoyed and why?
So the vast majority of the boards I've actually turned down because if I don't feel like I can have a big impact, I don't need to come sit in a room with a massive board where no one's going to be able to decide anything. And so my board, for example, Walker Edison, there's 7 people. Okay. I mean, we get stuff done, right? Yeah. With 7 people, like you can come to conclusions really quickly. And actually decide on a direction to move. I really enjoy the Go Utah board. We are doing some amazing things there in incentivizing high-paying jobs. In fact, it's probably a detriment to me running Walker Edison that I keep bringing,
you're bringing in these tech jobs that compete with your workers.
Yes, yeah. In fact, I had someone resign today who was a year out of college that they got like 2.5 times their pay, and I felt like I was already paying a lot. So, and I told them like, great job, like go take that job. It's amazing. I enjoy. Boards that I can have an impact on. And then I've had some really great experiences with charity boards here in Utah. So the Make-A-Wish Foundation of Utah, I'm currently serving on the Intermountain board, and we're raising funds for some incredible medical advancements that, Megan and I have been fortunate enough to donate to. And just there's a lot of good happening in Utah.
Yeah. One thing I could say, Brad, we met under the guise of entrepreneurship probably 6 or 8 years ago. And I was impressed with you, your business. But the thing that I've respected and loved most about you is your desire to be engaged in other things. I think it's time for the entrepreneurs of the state to step up. I know some of us have, some more than others. We need to step up and continue to give back. And you've been an example of that, I've thought all along. Is that just kind of, where did that come from? Inspire the up and coming entrepreneurs that are listening to this and thinking about how do I give back? Like give them a place to start, give them how is that always, at least since I've known you, that's kind of always been part of your DNA. Why, how,
When Matt Davis and I, my business partner, and I started Walker Edison, we always had this view that call it karma, call it whatever you want, as long as we were trying to do good in the community, that good would come to us. And so maybe that's a really naive way to look at the world. But
I think that's a good way to look. Yeah.
So we would go, just he and I, and box food at the Utah Food Bank. We had no money, but we did have time, and we had our 2 bare hands. That, over time, from a culture building perspective, doing work in the community, and now we have hundreds of employees in our corporate office, it is incredible what we are able to accomplish in an afternoon. So we have a volunteer time off program that I strongly encourage all of our employees to take advantage of. I will pay you to go work charity.
That's cool.
And this is a very entrepreneurial thing for me to say, but I did not have any core values until a year and a half ago with my business. I turned it over to my management team. I just said, guys, what do you think our core values are?
Yeah.
And resoundingly, the number one core value was we give. It's a play off of Walker Edison, but we give.
That's awesome.
And it's this thread that has bound our company together.
Is that the philanthropic kind of arm of Walker Edison?
Yes.
I love it. Keep talking about it because I've heard of it, but I just don't know the details.
What was really amazing is, our office in Southeast Asia and then our office in London, they hear about this. We're not overt, you guys have to do this. It's my team members that have taken this over, and they said, there's this awesome charity that I love. Can we go take 30 people from the office and go volunteer and really have a big impact and make a difference? And the answer is absolutely. Well, in our business travels, they'll be talking about this with their colleagues over in the London office. And the London office didn't have a formal, hey, we're going to go do charity work. And pretty soon I start getting pictures of my London office teammates running a 10K to raise money for cancer research, or donating, doing a book drive to help, underprivileged kids. And then I get a note from my, Southeast Asia office, and they're like, hey, we are the primary sponsors of this orphanage. it's all just been taken over, by my colleagues, and they're the ones, pushing this initiative. It is the number one needle mover that I have as an entrepreneur to raise the spirits and to really drive employee engagement across the company.
That's awesome. We need more and more companies and entrepreneurs to catch that spirit, right? And I think there are a lot of companies that do a great job of that, but we just need to always keep our focus on that for sure. I feel that at Peak Capital Partners, how do we do better at that? Jeff, Jamie, and I have tried, we've tried some things that haven't worked. We've done some other things that have been pretty good. It's hard sometimes to find that, but I love that. We give, Walker Edison gives. I got it. It's awesome. Okay, I want to ask you two personal questions and then wrap up. Like we said at the beginning, not every life is straight and to the right, I know you've gone through some hard things, and I know you've had some challenges. Tell us a little bit about how you've overcome some of the darkest days or times in your life. What's mattered to you? I think there are a lot of people struggling right now. They're lonely. We've come out of COVID. It's kind of this weird interim time. Technology is weird, social media, the divisiveness in politics. Obviously, the war is heartbreaking. Give some insight, hope to people who are maybe struggling, how you've overcome challenges. Or
what's really interesting, Jeff, is like this war. We're watching Russia with unprovoked aggression kill innocent men, women, and children, and it's heartbreaking. I would tell you that during the darkest times, both in my life and at work and personally and professionally, they can often serve to be unifying. And so when I was back in Washington, D.C., meeting with our congressional delegation, they're all Republicans. But I'm meeting with Democrats, Republicans. We are unified around our support with Ukraine. And so I think it's an interesting kind of subject matter. When stuff hurts, and it hurts all of us, we often come together, whether it's an earthquake, a tornado, like a war. You mentioned that I had won the EY Entrepreneur of the Year award. What you didn't mention is that I had been nominated 2 other times and lost. Okay, and what was really interesting is I was nominated at a time, the first time, when I thought I was going out of business. And I'm like, are these guys really going to give me an award for being the CEO of the year when I'm like on the verge of insolvency?
I love it.
The real CEO award goes to those people who are slogging through challenges, both with their business and with, their personal life. One of the absolute hardest things that I've ever had to deal with was 12 years ago when we lost our son. Grant Scott Bonham is his name. And we lost him to a kidney problem. He was born full term. He was crying in our arms, and with Megan and I, and he passed away. And it was I'd never experienced depression before, Jeff.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I had a lot of sympathy for those that did until that moment.
Yeah.
And it served to make me a better person.
Yeah.
It was so hard. Like, I've never experienced pain. It was like a physical pain. I can't even describe it. And there was this dark cloud that entered my life, and I could not see beyond. Like, I went through the daily motions. I experienced real and true depression. And fast forward 12 years, and we've managed to turn Walker Edison miraculously into this really cool business. And Megan and I were just able to donate enough money to prop up the new neonatal fetal center at Primary Children's.
That's so
and
awesome.
we're naming it the Grant Scott Bonham Fetal Center.
Wow.
And we think that had this existed 12 years ago, our son might be with us today, because they're doing these incredible in utero procedures, correcting life-threatening problems with these babies, and they're born healthy and live normal adult lives. And it's like one of the greatest honors of our life, but it was inspired by one of the darkest moments that we've ever passed through.
I love that perspective, turning our hard times into something good. It takes courage, it takes strength to do that. And there are some days you don't think you're going to make it. You're not going to pull out. You're not going to turn it into something good. But if you persist, you can turn those dark moments into something great. And I love that you found something that is so close to home for you that you're passionate about. like the Primary Children's Center, right?
Yep.
I think it's a great example, and I admire. I hadn't heard that full story about Grant Scott Bonham, but I won't forget it, man.
Thanks.
That was very touching. Send us off here. What are you hoping for? What are you looking forward to in the future? Your future's bright. You have an exciting business. I know that you're working on a lot of things there. You're involved civically on so many boards, and the future's certainly bright here in Utah. Send us off on a high note here, Brad. Take us away. And by the way, again, thanks for sharing that story. I think it was really touching. And what's cool is you and Megan are now trying to do something so that other people don't have to feel that pain, right?
Yeah.
Like, hopefully children can be helped through the neonatal center. It's just really cool.
I think, Jeff, I feel really lucky to be in the position that I am. And I feel really lucky to have gone through some of these really challenging experiences. It felt every day for the first decade of building this business here in the Salt Lake Valley, like we were going to go out of business. Like that's what it felt like every single, it was like a survival test. It's like, what do we have to overcome next? I would just say to anyone listening here, you can do it. The day might seem dark. The day turns to a week. And pretty soon it turns into a month, and it turns into a year, and you get up and you grind and you overcome, and it all serves to make you a better person, to make you maybe a better husband or wife or spouse. The decisions that we make on a daily basis affect us in the eternities. And so, what you decide to do today, whether it's I'm going to overcome this, or I'm just going to, I can barely pull my pants on this morning. I'm so down,
Yeah.
There will be light at some point at the end of that tunnel. And I'm a testimony to that, right? Because there were many, many dark days, both personally and trying to build something. And yet here we are on the other side of that. And I know there will be more dark days, but I also know that it is possible to overcome those challenges. Stick with it.
Yeah.
If a good idea was a good idea a year ago, it's a good idea tomorrow. It'll be a good idea, help other people see that vision, catch that vision, and lead from the front. Help them understand that we are going to overcome anything that comes our way.
Amen, my brother. I think that is a good way to wrap up. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Jeff.
Brad Bonham, thanks for coming in today. It's been good to be with you as always.
Thanks, buddy.
Hey guys, I love that episode with Brad Bonham. I love Brad Bonham. He's such a great guy. Like I said, if you haven't heard of Walker Edison, check it out. It's like the coolest business with the most interesting name that you maybe haven't heard of here in Utah. But he's a great entrepreneur. But what I love about him, like I said, he's always been civically minded and engaged. I really appreciate that because I think that is a process and or a journey. So the earlier you start, the better you can get at it, the more you can learn and figure out how you can make a difference, et cetera, et cetera. I look for Brad to do super exciting things here in the future here in our state and in our country. A couple things that stuck out to me. I loved We Give. Walker Edison gives. If you are an entrepreneur listening to this podcast, if I've invested in your business or not, look for ways to give back. It is incumbent upon us as leaders, as business leaders, to create a culture where people can thrive and be their best and give back. I think Brad's done a great job of that. He admitted that he just did that a couple of years ago, so it's never too late. And I think it's better if you can start a little bit earlier, and I think Brad would agree with that. The other thing is, did you hear him at the end? He said this, and I wanted to put a pin in it, an exclamation point in it. He felt like every day he was going out of business. That is how entrepreneurship often feels. That's why entrepreneurs deserve our respect and love and admiration. But if you feel that way, don't give up hope. I felt like that in a lot of my ventures. It feels like you're going to go out of business every day. I loved how Brad was honest about that and also shared the touching story about his son, Grant Scott Bonham. You can do it. Believe in yourself. Life isn't easy. It's not easy for any of us. Remember to exercise compassion and keep going, man. If you're an entrepreneur and you're pushing it, go for it. Always believe. We have so many fantastic female and male entrepreneurs in the state of Utah. It is an exciting time to be here. Can't wait for what's coming around the corner.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Us Podcast with Jeff Burningham. Please help us grow by leaving a rating and review and subscribing at your favorite podcast platform. Also, tell your friends and share on social media. See you again next week.
Hey, Jeff.
What's up, Sal?
Have you heard about me jumping out of an airplane?
Did I hear about it? I was with you.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You were there.
Did you forget about me falling to my death with you?
No, I did not forget. But you can listen. If you have not heard about us jumping out of an airplane, you can listen to our podcast, Under Our Bed.
Yeah, and hear about skydiving.
And all sorts of other interesting and amazing and funny things.
Hopefully mostly funny, but we've also covered some important topics this season. You know, Sally's dad passed away, and we spoke about when someone you love dies. That's been something that's been on our mind, and we've been talking a lot about, in the last several months, including even last night.
Yes, we have. And so listen in and hear funny and inspirational and interesting and sad and whatever you're in the mood for. We've got it. Under Our Bed.
Check out Under Our Bed with Jeff and Sal. We'll be there.
We'll be there.